Hello, everybody. Wow, thank you all for coming. And now I'm nervous. Now I wasn't okay. Now I'm a little nervous. So I wanted to just give you a quick story. My friend Pasang is going to actually come up and help me just to hold some things up. So I'll start with just life. This is the enemy. We have one. And you think of all good movies in this world, there's always a good guy and a bad guy. So Earth has a good guy and a bad guy, Satan and God. So I feel like my childhood, Satan tried to take me out and destroy, my life. And listen, I really am not going to cry. I'm going to be strong because I've been strong. And I thought, I'm not crying. I'm not going to cry. So I'm not going to cry. So these are his names, though. The enemy. So he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. The father of lies, evil, darkness, causes doubt and fear, torment, hatred, guilty, killer, stress, anxiety, worry, dysfunction, causes suicide, death. He makes people feel dirty, gives you trouble, shame, low self-esteem, depression, regret, suicide. He puts rebellion, rejection. He's mean, and it says that he has a fiery furnace and gnashing of teeth is hell. So that's what it says also in the Bible about him. So that is him. So now this is my mom. Isn't she beautiful? Okay, so my mother. Now I'm going to tell you a quick story about my mother and father, because it shows you where I came from. And most of the time, that's where we come from, right? From what other things? So she was neglected, she was unloved, she was rejected. Her mom had 3 kids, my Uncle Robbie, my Uncle Mickey, and my mother. My Uncle Mickey had spinal bifida, but he taught me about Jesus when I was a little girl. So that was one thing that I really specifically remembered. But her father abandoned her as well. So it's funny that these issues that she had, all the pain comes with it. Then she was verbally abused and she allowed it. She was sexually abused. She lived in denial. She went to hardcore drug addiction. She was a methadone addict for 38 years. Chronic liar, and she was a klepto. She stole all the time. And I really believe that when you don't deal with this stuff, like these things come with it. She lived in torment. She had no worth. She lived in great pain. She lived in shame, no hope, neglect, and emptiness. And she died 56 years old. So that's my mom now. So we'll put some of these, put some of them in my mother cup. Okay, just to show you, this is her stuff that she had. And these are up here are going to represent the pain and the things that I have been through in my life to show you where it comes from, too, before I got saved. So this is my mom. Now my father. So my father had it a little bit harder. He did accept Christ 2 months before he died. Praise God. And I'm going to tell you that this is my perception as a little girl. I loved my father. My father kept us no matter what. He was kind of my hero in spite of everything, but he still had a lot of great pain from his own life that he never dealt with. So this is the thing. If you don't deal with that stuff, it usually gets passed down to the next generation. So that's where I came in. So my father was unwanted. His both parents didn't want him. And they had him, and then they separated, had 2 separate families, and neither family wanted him. So he was unwanted. He was rejected. And you're going to put each one. Just put each one in there. And then he was abandoned as well, because they both kind of abandoned him, and he was shut out of both sides of the family. So he was really young and went to drugs very young. He was unloved, neglected, hurt. Now he became angry. Now he became bitter and rageful. My father was very rageful. Verbal and physical abuse. Now he became an abuser because he was hurt and harmed so much. He became an abuser. Puts up many walls of protection, which a lot of us can do, right? When you have so much pain in your life, you just put up those walls. He lived in denial and fearful. Deep drug addiction. He went to a rehab for 2 years as I was a child, probably when I was about 10, for 2 years. But it worked for a short time, but there was no Christ center in it, so it didn't really sustain him. He got into hardcore pornography, and he was tormented. He had no hope. He died 47 years old. So that is my dad. So I'm going to put him over here. So that'll just show you. So this is me. This is my cup, but I'm filled with all kinds of stuff because I got my mother and father's. All their stuff, you get part of that. So this one, you'll see as each pain happens, it gets dirtier and dirtier. So my mom, I'm going to pour into me. So I'm not going to put that in just yet, just so you can see. So I started out with, probably maybe a little bit more. Before I was even born, just so you know, before I was born. Okay. Now, this is my story. So when I was born, my mom and dad were 16, 17 years old, and I was unwanted because my brother was first. So my poor brother was the first mistake. You're that young with that many issues and problems. It's hard, and they were so young. They both weren't loved by their parents, and then they had my brother, and then I came next. So I was a double mistake. So right from the get-go, we already started, that. So now I'm going to pour into mine, right? So I was unloved, rejected. Now you pour more in. Okay, and then I had abandonment issues throughout my whole life. Now came, I was sexually abused by my uncle, Buddy, for about 3 years, from 5 to 8. So what was hard was because I was already looking for my mother, and I was already wanting that person to rescue me, but she left when I was 4. So that was really difficult because I was wanting her. My dad was already a rager. He already was beating, and he beat her up too, and that's why they kind of left and they divorced. And that's the other thing. Divorce has a great effect on kids as well. So that was another area. So when my uncle did that to me, that was probably the biggest one. That was a big one because you're all kinds of deception. You don't trust yourself as a little kid. You start. You know what's wrong, but you don't fully know what's wrong. You can't make sense of it because he loved me, and he was gentle and kind in a sense. So it was a real deception because he was more calm. My father was more rageful. So I kind of wanted somebody calm, so it's it messes you up a lot as a child. You don't really understand the effects of what it does. I didn't put my mother in there too, and my mother's stuff. So that's her stuff. I got my father's stuff. And they got Christ later in their life, and they never dealt with their issues. So that's why they died so young as well. So now, I remember that I had recurring bad dreams. So 2 of them were, the one was that somebody was chasing me up and down these hills, and then I'd run into the house, and nobody would know that I was there. It was like crazy. Everybody's there. They're all saying happy birthday to somebody. I don't remember who, but I'd be screaming and crying and saying, Dad, help me. He's killing me. He's going to kill me. And no one could hear me. So it's funny as a little kid because I never told. I didn't tell anybody that I was being molested. My cousin finally told. So thank God, because that's how it stopped. But I still never told my dad anyway after that, and I don't know why. But that was later that, I kind of figured that out. But so my Uncle Mickey's the one that told me about Jesus. He was not the one that hurt and harmed me. He's the one that actually gave me some hope. So I always had this little seed of hope in me no matter what. So when I was 10, I remember cursing God because this boy didn't like me, and I cursed him up and down. And I cursed God up and down. And I went out, and I remember crying hysterical outside on that porch. It was raining, and I begged him to forgive me. And I didn't curse again for like 6 years. But I didn't have anybody that went to church. I didn't have anybody that took me. I didn't know anybody, and I wasn't plugged in. So my dad remarried my stepmom, Jeanette, and she had a little sister, Brittany. So that was a little bit tough for me, too, because she kept saying, I can't wait to have a little girl. I can't wait to have a little girl. And I felt like I am a little girl. So that was kind of hard for me, but she was young. She was only 10 years older than my father. So it was kind of a difficult thing. So we really had some struggles. She was always a friend to me, though. And then she had my little sister, Brittany. And Brittany really helped me and blessed me with Brittany because I loved her so much. She was such a great blessing in my life. And it actually prepared me for my daughter. So it was such an awesome thing. God still will take things, and you see him weaved in here. Even though Satan meant it for evil and tried to really take me out in many things, which I could have became really a mess in a lot of ways. And I was until this day. So then I started to become promiscuous at the age of 11. I had an abortion at the age 14. I was suicidal about 14 and then about 17, twice that I tried to kill myself. Wouldn't you? Right? I mean, you're like, the weight is too heavy. And look, I'm not even pouring the rest of them in here. So it gets bigger and it gets stronger because now I'm starting to be also I am starting to abuse other people. Now, right, my father, he became an abuser. So now I start to be like messed up. All my issues start to really weigh on me, and I start to become dysfunctional myself. So this is when I met my daughter's dad. And I met him when I was 15, and him and I were so young. So both of us, like being that young and dysfunctional, and I went back and forth. I was controlling. I had all kinds of stuff, and he's probably like, this girl's nuts. But his mother and father were like a mother and father to me. His mom loved me unconditional. I'll tell you what, that was the hardest thing about our relationship. I loved his parents so much. They loved me. It was like unconditional, boy, that they loved me. She had 3 boys, so I was the girl she never had. And Pop-Up he just loves you no matter what. Pop-Up is just so cool because he is such acceptance for people, no matter what. The meanest person could yell and curse at, but he just doesn't ever let anything bother him. And he's like, it's so awesome that God put him in my life to be a father to me. So that is when I met them. Now, I was in pretty much full rebellion at that point, because of all this stuff that is inside of me. Now I was kind of hurting other people. I definitely did not trust men. I was numbing. Now I was really starting to numb. Addiction. I started to really drink and party hard and, partying, right? And then I also had a really big struggle with sugar addiction. But the alcohol was the one, I couldn't wait to get wasted. And, that's funny. You think that is so fun at the time, but then you go home and you're so empty and so lonely. I would cry so hard after. It looks so fun, but then you're always alone after, and you feel so alone and empty. And I did. Now I started to become angry and rageful. Some of that in there. Spiteful and vengeful. Boy, was I vengeful. If I told you some of the things I did, you'd be like, no way, because they're really bad. I was really spiteful. My father was very spiteful. Let me tell you, take traits after your parents. I was very spiteful, and so was he. And then I was in denial and dysfunction for a while. But I did have customers to start to tell me about the Lord. When I was 15, this woman I was 15 at a job, she says to me, Kimmy, you could accept Christ into your life and he could help you and all that. I remember thinking, she gave me a paper and it was a sinner's prayer, it was called, and said, like, Lord, I believe in you and that you're my Lord and Savior, and please forgive me of all my sins and all that. And I read that thing for a whole year, and then I lost it. And then when I was about 21 is when I finally got saved. I had customers. Again, it's funny, God used customers in my life. I'm a hairdresser, work at Gerber Salon, and it's so funny how he'll take whatever circumstance you're in and he'll use it. So more customers, they're all Christians. And this one girl, Irene Kemmler, she sent her mother, Judy, her mother, Jerry, and her sister, Judy, and this other girl, Vicky Schneider. They were the ones that really started to kind of teach me about God. I remember thinking, you're a little crazy. What's game night? I party. I don't know that I do a game night. I thought it was kind of silly and weird and but I loved their peace that they had. They had this amazing peace and this amazing joy that I so loved. So I wanted that. Now I started to finally go to church. I did say the sinner's prayer with my aunt on the year before. And I remember specifically she wanted to read the Bible to me that whole year. And I remember keep hanging. I wouldn't answer the phone. I'd see her number and I wouldn't answer it. I thought she's a Jesus freak. She's nuts. She's crazy. Forget it. I'm not doing that. But then those customers, and then they kept telling me, go to this church. It's Calvary Chapel in Old Bridge. So I finally did. It was in Carl Sandburg. It took me 3 months to go. I was with my daughter's dad. And every Sunday I was sick for 3 months before I finally just got up and went. I thought, that's it. I am going. Because let me tell you, Satan knew. He tried to take me out, but he knew, boy, God is stronger. God will give you such great victory. And boy, he did not want me knowing God. Because when I do something, I do it with all my heart. And those that know me well know that I do everything with everything I have, every part of my being. Never halfway or a little bit. I dive in deep. So when I got saved, I finally went to that church and I just said, listen, please just give me the Bible. I just want the Bible. I don't want your story. I don't feel like hearing it, please. Took the Bible. I didn't feel good again, but I went that time anyway. I opened that Bible. Me and Heather's dad, we went to Florida. And he's like, yeah, I read that my whole life, but it was my first time. And I'm like devouring it. I'm like, Psalm 129. So this was my life verse. It was Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And I remember thinking, God, you know me? You knit me together? How? Like, who are you? And it started to open up a door of saying, who is this God that loves me? But I wanted desperate love. I mean, who doesn't want love? Who wants to be loved? I do. And I know that all mankind want to be loved and treasured and valued. So then the other one was, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans of good and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. And there's more that goes with it. That was like my first part of it. But the second part is just as important, because this is how I got to know God. So he says, then you will call upon me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me. When you search for me with all your heart, I will be found by you, says the Lord. So when I start to think God, you really have a future for me? Like, I'm important, I'm valuable, I'm special. I started to believe those things. Now I start to kind of soar. My cousin Jimmy got saved, my best friend Karen, my brother Mark. Now, I was just like, this is awesome, this is great. Everybody thought I was kind of a little crazy because I went extreme. Just like, I didn't care. He loves me, and that's all that matters. So now he started to do this. I started to overflow. Going to eventually start seeing that cup out. But now this was me in Christ, okay? He took all my sins, all my stuff. But I'll tell you what, I still carried a lot of this pain, a lot of it. So even though I was saved, I still was hurting about many issues. I still was dysfunctional in a lot of ways as a Christian. But I love God so much, so I couldn't understand sometimes, how in the world can this be? So I was back and forth with my daughter's father for 10 years on and off. It was really hard because I loved him so much. I cared about him, and his family was so big to me. We were both dysfunctional. We both struggled, and I kind of went back with him though after I got saved, and he thought I was crazy. He thought, you're nuts, and he was like, forget it. But we did get back together, and then I had my daughter. The greatest gift, and I am not going to cry, the greatest gift God has ever given me, because I thought, unconditional love for the first time, that I could love this little baby unconditional and she would love me. And it just was so awesome. And I'm so grateful because she has taught me so many things. It's funny that I wanted better for her in my life, and that kind of kept me on a straight and narrow path with God. Because I thought, I want more for her than what I had. Otherwise, she would have grew up like me. Because guess what? It would have went right down to her. I would have been so dysfunctional. It's funny because I would say to her, Heather, you don't understand. You should be thankful I got saved. Because sometimes she's like, Mom, you're too much. It's just too much. And and I said, honey, trust me when I tell you, I would not be a good mother if it wasn't for God coming into my life and changing me. I would be a mess. Because that's all I knew was a mess. Listen, I'm saved, but I still have a mess inside. That mess is still in there, boy. It's still dirty water. And that is when I start to know that I had to start doing recovery. So I had 7 different foster children at that time, though, and I used to pray, God, help me love those that are unloved, because I was unloved. So it's funny how now he starts to change things, and it was one thing at a time. It was a process. Now he started to give me great compassion for kids that were unloved or unwanted, or and I started to really want to love them and show them the love that I had gotten. And my daughter was the only little girl, so I wanted her to also have compassion and love and other friends. And it's funny because she has such a great love for other people too. She loved all those kids that I had, and she just was such a great kid. I'm so thankful. But I didn't date for 6 years either after I had her, because I wanted to pour into her all that God had poured into me, so that I didn't make all the same mistakes. But I made plenty, but at least not as many as I could have. So so now I was a work in progress. I did a 180 turn. So then I got plugged into church. That was something really important for my recovery too. All right, I got plugged into Calvary Chapel for 17 years, and that's where I started to learn who God was. And I started to trust him. And even after 10 years, I still remember saying, God, I still don't trust you. I still don't trust you. And because all that damage, who did I have to trust? No one. When I went for counseling, the guy said, Kimmy, I'm so sorry you never had love in your childhood. I'm sorry to say, I looked through all your records and everything we've been through. And I was like, that's not good. You know what I mean? I remember thinking it was like knives going through my heart, because it was truth, right? I had to get out of denial. So now, and I remember my friend Andrea, she gave me The Father Heart of God. It was by Doug Easterday. It was a cassette series. And I listened to them things 100 times over and over again. And I'll tell you what, I look back at that now, and I realize that is what kept me connected to God the whole entire walk, my 23 years of walking with God, because he explained God in such a way that I wasn't fearful and afraid. My father was a belt whipper. Let me tell you, you were whipped. Boy, you did wrong, you did bad, but I'm grateful that he disciplined us because we were better because of it. But I also feel like it was harsh and it was like to the extreme in other areas. So with that, it taught me a better sense of the real God and what he was like. And that kept me knowing that I can always run to him no matter how many times I fell. And trust me, we fall 1,000 times, like being saved, because it's a process that we have to take each one of these painful things that cause so much torment, confusion, chaos, darkness. I always had this darkness follow me. That was codependency. I didn't even know what that was. Now I was reading my Bible every day too. That was something really important for me, because I had to start to get to know God. And listen, if you read anybody's biography, you'll know that person. See, because people think, well, it's too hard to read. It's too complicated. But if you read somebody's biography, you know who they are. You learn who they are. It's funny. I read this one guy's, Joel Schoenberg, and he was hurt as a little boy in a fire, and he was burned almost to death. And I ran into him in Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale, and I knew him. I remember going, "Wow, that looks like Joel Schoenberg," because he had a hat on, just the picture and he walks by me, he heard me, he's like, "I am Joel Schoenberg." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I know you," because we get to know somebody if you read about them. And I wrote a journal for my daughter, a whole entire journal before she was born, of my whole life, of everything. Because if I died when she was 6, she wouldn't know me. You see, but she would ask everybody that knew me, "What was my mom like? What was my mom like?" She'd want to know. But this journal showed everything of who I was and what I loved and what I didn't love, and the craziness of my life. Listen, she could even know I was crazy sometimes, because that went with it. And then I told my best friend Karen, if I ever die, just make sure that you give her this when she's 16. And it was my journal and my diary. And it's funny because I did give it to her when she was 16. And it's cool because now she gets to read about my life. And that's like the Bible to me. It was my love letter from God to me to show me that I was important to him, that I mattered. So now I had still major issues with relationships. So I was engaged 3 times, on and off. The one that probably affected me the most, and listen, I had great men that loved me and cared about me, but I couldn't even appreciate them because I still had so much pain inside. See, all this was still inside of me, and I had to get rid of that stuff one at a time. And that is where I started to do, I got engaged to somebody that was a lot like my father. And he was a replica, it's funny, of my father. And he was an addict, but he was in church. And he professed to be a believer. But he had a best friend, Stevie. And let me tell you, that best friend, he blessed me so much because he always loved me unconditionally and told me, like, "Kimmy, what are you doing? Come on, you are a great girl. This is not for you, And I finally got over that, but it was probably one of the hardest things because that was the door opener. That truly was the door opener to start letting this stuff out. I went for counseling for a whole year and I found out I was codependent. I didn't even know what the word was. Had no clue. I thought, I'm a good person. I'm great. I'm a great Christian. I thought I was like somebody great. And when I realized how dysfunctional I still really was, I was in shock that like I still had so much stuff. But God, you love me, you care about me, but I was right with God, but I wasn't still right with other people. So I had to learn how not to be so defective. And this is the old me. Listen, I was spiteful, mean-hearted. I was revengeful, critical, gossiper, manipulating, shallow, codependent, controlling, alcoholic, fighter, and I expected perfection. So in relationships, that was my biggest struggle because let me tell you, they were gonna give me more than what I deserved. So I would. The pain that I had carried with men, okay, because that was the biggest pain because of my uncle and my dad and all that issue. That was the one that I wanted somebody to go over the arc of the pain that I had to fill. But really, only God can really fill. But I had to finally come to terms with it and get out of denial. So now I could really start pouring God's word and his life into me and his healing. So I thought I was done. That's when I went for the year of counseling. I felt like I was going to die. I literally was in bed for 3 months, like curled up in a ball. Only when I had to go to work would I get up and go to work. I remember being at work crying so hard, thinking, I'm not going to make it. I want to call him. I want to call him. I wanted to go back to this guy, And it's funny because God provided his best friend to be my best friend for 4 years. And he loved me unconditional without any other, nothing sexual. He loved me unconditional as such a best friend. We went bike riding, we cooked dinner, we did all kinds of great things, and God provided him for me to help me to let go of that other dysfunctional relationship that I was in. And that was Stevie Rodriguez. So I'm grateful for him too. It was a great part of my life and my walk and my recovery. So with that counseling, I finally got through it, and I thought I was good with men now. That's it. I'm going to be okay. That's what I thought, right? So now my real mother comes back into my life. My real mother, Bonnie. Now remember, when I was little, she left when I was 4. I seen her one more time when I was like 15. I realized, oh my gosh, she's horrible. Like, not horrible. She wasn't horrible. She was hurting and broken. But in my perception, she was the answer to my recovery. She's going to rescue me of all this crap and junk. She's going to help me. My mother will love me. That was in my mind the whole time. When I found her, I was devastated because my little fantasy in my little world thinking, my mom, she's the answer to get me better. My father's a mess. My uncle's doing all this stuff. My poor brother, me and my brother were trying to hang on to each other. And it didn't work, okay? Because my mom was more broken than my dad in so many ways. So that was a really big shatter in my life. So now my daughter is about 7 or 8. She's like, Mom, what do you mean your mother didn't love you? Now we're unconditionally loving my daughter, Mama and Papa, and my stepmom, Jeanette. And my dad only had 2 years with her before he died. Heather's, all Pete's family really kind of became my family. My brother, Mark, Diana, they loved her. Aunt Diane, Uncle Lenny, all of them really. And Aunt Jen, she helped me homeschool Heather for 2 years. God really provided a family for me. And that was something important. And listen, church became my family in so many ways. Spiritual mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, friends, people that I could start trusting. And listen, didn't mean that we didn't fight or I had to learn to, even when we click heads or like I don't like something about somebody,